Hello, and welcome to a very special episode of Enlightened Society, in which I'll be discussing a masterpiece of modern art and of interactive simulation and philosophy. What the developer David O'Reilly calls an interactive nature simulation. Everything is an interactive experience where everything you see is a thing you can be, from animals to plants to galaxies and beyond. Travel between outer and inner space and explore a vast, interconnected universe of things without enforced goals, scores, or tasks to complete. Everything is a procedural, AI-driven simulation of the systems of nature, seen from the points of view of everything in the universe. I would describe it as a philosophical, interactive 3D game that explores the boundaries, the functions, and the value of our modern technology and understanding. It's a kind of return to the core fundamental being of our existence. Using our newfound technological powers as a civilization and a species. This is accomplished by using 3D software to allow the user to become all the elements of the universe. And equally exciting is the inclusion of narration by the great Zen philosopher Alan Watts, one of the most important people to have ever lived. This video is part impressions, part review, part gameplay, part philosophical commentary, and part tribute and praise for this masterpiece, an honor that I give sparingly. This will contain some spoilers, but most of them left out, and there's far more in this game than I will cover. I don't do game reviews for many reasons, but this is something that is beyond extraordinary, and I'm compelled to share my thoughts about it. I've been struggling with the language surrounding some of our modern games because the category game is so broad that it's self-limiting. Games include everything from sports to mindless time-wasting software to all kinds of board games to computer simulations to the most thoughtful games like chess and Jeopardy. So I thought this would be a good opportunity to begin by exploring the word itself. The etymology of the word game has Germanic roots and relates to words from Northern Europe about 1,000 years ago. It means joy, fun, amusement, sport, merriment, and the Gothic version includes words like participation and communion. And this relates to how Alan Watts described himself as an entertainer, a specific kind of entertainer that we don't have a lot of these days. In the same way that a musician or painter expresses himself for the pleasure of sharing, so he entertains with philosophical ideas that he finds fascinating and valuable. This is not wholly unique, as Mark Twain was somewhat similar. They perform like comedians do. But the main goal is not to make you laugh necessarily, but to make you think. The developer calls it an interactive nature simulation. And I like that definition because it more specifically defines what it is. It's a spiritual simulation which seeks to give an impression of what it's like to be everything else, to educate as well as to entertain. It's about play in the literal way, and also the high art of play, and the serendipity of play, and the joy of philosophical exploration. It is mindfully directed play, meant to be valuable beyond itself, by imparting knowledge and also showing new ways to view the world that can cause profound changes in one's perspective and everyday life. It does all this using one of the most advanced technologies that we have, 3D interactive computing. Use this opportunity to look at things from a new perspective. And let's begin with ourselves right now. The fact that you exist, that there is existence, that you have a level of consciousness, that all this exists in the infinity of space and time. Existence, right now, is surreal, astonishing, amazing, miraculous. And computers have been developed with interactive software in cyberspace that can be used to transcend time and space and the limitations of our own body. The game begins at the metaphorical beginning. It begins by asking fundamental questions, like, why am I here? How did I get here? When did this start? It's often said that these are the most basic questions that a human being asks, but I rarely meet people who have even the slightest curiosity about these questions. It's possible that these questions have just been drilled out of us by our modern materialist reality, or funneled into religious dogma where they are euthanized. I think these are the most profound questions, and I love to ponder the questions before even attempting to reach a conclusion. What's more is that it's a real miracle to experience these questions in this particular age, because we can add so much substance to the answers. We know enough information to become enlightened on a mass scale. Our existence is a miracle. Right now is a miracle, even when it seems ordinary. The trick is to see the miracle at any moment. And the secret is now is all there is, all there ever has been or will be, in all its forms. It's always now. Only the things in this moment change. Now is the miracle of all miracles, the mere fact that it exists. But of course, this thought is much different than the authentic experience of this idea. The game answers these questions in part with voiceover from Alan Watts, but more so by allowing us to take many different perspectives from all the things in existence itself, from the micro to the macro, from objects to events. By taking different perspectives, by becoming them, they are interesting and valuable simply by noticing them. And also by quickly changing our perspective, this ability gives valuable insights into the essence of perspective themselves. Now let's talk a little bit about the gameplay itself. Many animals, especially the first ones that you play as, move in a particular way. Instead of moving limbs, they rotate and revolve over and over and over. This philosophical game is causing brain damage to people who are so used to thinking literally, and they miss the metaphor and symbolism. If this game is anything, it's a metaphor and an experience of ourselves beyond the seemingly ordinary life that we live. The turning over and over and over can be viewed as metaphors for the cycle of day-to-day lives that we live, for the continuous orbits of this rock we call Earth around the giant fireball in the sky, each one we call a year, which repeats over and over. A metaphor for our entire lives, for generations, for the continuum of a species, for our eternal recurrence, as Nietzsche says. Instead of giving birth to new offspring, the cycle of birth and rebirth, you rotate over and over and over, which is timeless. On the one hand, it's playful. On the other, it's unexpected and jarring to the mind, a kind of reminder of the bizarre nature of this experience and the uniqueness of this philosophical and interactive universe simulator. All the things communicate with each other. They do this by singing. It's communication, but with a twist. It's a universal language, so that different species can talk to each other. And it's a playful form of communication. It's fun and enjoyable, and it represents the peaceful side of communicating with others, as opposed to the other universal communication, brute force. Singing is a joyful and creative and artistic way to interact. The sounds that the animals and other objects make are realistic, and they're quality recordings that are clear and representative. Similar to the value of quickly changing perspectives, listening to many disparate voices communicating is also refreshing in novel ways. You become other beings in order to transcend our limited experience. Most of the animals have the same eyes, likely a reference to Alan Watts talking about how all animals have similar viewpoints of I, and the world revolving around that I, and have similar interpretations and feelings of what it means to be that I. As far as gameplay elements go, you are guided by different types of icons which open up various gameplay elements, such as listening to Alan Watts quotes, and reading the thoughts of other beings, and also help info.
I find it a little difficult to say what the subject matter of this seminar is going to be, because it's too fundamental to give it a title. I'm going to talk about what there is. Now, the first thing, though, that we have to do is to get our perspectives with some background about the basic ideas which influence our everyday common sense, our fundamental notions about what life is about. Ideas of the world which are built into the very nature of the language we use and of our ideas of logic and of what makes sense altogether. And these basic ideas I call myth not using the word myth to mean simply something untrue, but to use the word myth in a more powerful sense. A myth is an image in terms of which we try to make sense of the world.
Moving away from gameplay elements and back to the philosophical inquiry, similar to the question at the beginning, one of the most important questions to ask oneself is what to do with a life. What to do with a life. But not in the traditional form of thinking related to a career or family or success, nor in what destination to arrive at or what to believe, but thinking about it more as exploring on a journey in this remarkable circumstance that we have found ourselves. The more fundamental answer begins with, what is all this? And what was our path along the way to here? And what could or should be done with this opportunity? The answer in this computer simulation is to explore, wander, journey, to play, to learn and understand, to help ourselves and help others in all the ways possible. To notice that this has been going on for some time, that others have done this before us, that others around us now have different perspectives, and that they all have value in one form or another. The proper analogy here is the game of life. Use this commentary and this game to explore your own reality based on fundamental scientific and philosophical perspectives. Consciously approaching life in the form of a game, a simulation, with rules and obstacles, and not getting caught up in the hype or the dogma or culture or society, but treating it as a profound experience that is serious, but not too serious. My answer to all of this is in the form of a useful guide that calls for only the slightest of changes in perception. Using the terminology of everything to sing to each other. That is, to smile more, to make more art, to help more, forgive yourself and others more, be more humble in the face of the miracle. Try to make amends even in the worst circumstances. Keep trying after you fail. Keep exploring everything. Finally, the developer is a remarkable person and is doing humanity a great service with this work. Alan Watts and many others would be very proud of this work. It's a masterpiece. I look forward to many years of exploration and enjoyment.
You, as a human being, you grow out of this physical universe in just exactly the same way that an apple grows off an apple tree. So let's say the tree which grows apples is a tree which apples, using apple as a verb. And a world in which human beings arrive is a world that peoples. And so the existence of people is symptomatic of the kind of universe we live in. Just as hair on a head is symptomatic of what's going on in the organism. But we have been brought up not to feel that we belong in the world. So our popular speech reflects it. We say, I came into this world. You didn't. You came out of it. We say face facts. We talk about encounters with reality, as if it was a head-on meeting of completely alien agencies, and the average person has the sensation that he is a somewhat that exists inside a bag of skin, a center of consciousness, which looks out at this thing, and what the hell's it going to do to me? I recognize you. You kind of look like me, and I've seen myself in a mirror, and you look like you might be people. So maybe you're intelligent, maybe you can love too, and perhaps you're all right. Some of you are anyway. You've got the right color of skin, or you have the right religion, or whatever it is, you're okay. But there are all those people over in Asia, Africa, and they may not really be people. When you want to destroy someone, you always define them as unpeople. We have this hostility to the external world because of the superstition, the myth, the absolutely unfounded theory that you yourself exist only inside your skin. Now, I want to propose another idea altogether. Billions of years ago, you were a big bang. But now you're a complicated human being. But so we define ourselves as being only that. If you think that you are only inside your skin, you define yourself as one very complicated little curlicue, way out on the edge of that explosion, way out in space and way out in time. And then we cut ourselves off and don't feel that we're still the Big Bang. But you are. Depends how you define yourself. You are actually, if this is the way things started, if there was a Big Bang in the beginning, you're not something that is a result of the Big Bang. You're not something that is a sort of puppet on the end of the process. You are still the process. You are the Big Bang, the original force of the universe, coming on as whoever you are. See, when I meet you, I see not just what you define yourself as, Mr. So-and-so, Miss So-and-so, Mrs. So-and-so. I see every one of you as the primordial energy of the universe coming on at me in this particular way. I know I'm that too. But we've learned to define ourselves as separate from it. What I would call a kind of a basic problem we've got to go through first is to understand that there are no such things as things. That is to say, separate things. That is only a way of talking. If you can understand this, you're going to have no further problems. I once asked a group of high school children, what do you mean by a thing? And first of all, they gave me all sorts of synonyms. They said it's an object, which is simply another word for a thing. It doesn't tell you anything about what you mean by a thing. Finally, a very smart girl who was in the group, said a thing is a noun. And she was quite right. A noun isn't a part of nature, it's a part of speech. There are no nouns in the physical world. There are no separate things in the physical world either. See, the physical world is wiggly. The clouds, mountains, trees, people are all wiggly. And only when human beings get working at things, they build buildings in straight lines and try and make out that the world isn't really wiggly. But here are we sitting in this room all built on straight lines, but each one of us is as wiggly as all get out. Now then, when you want to get control of something that wiggles, it's pretty difficult, isn't it? You try and pick up a fish in your hands, and the fish is wiggly and it slips out. What do you do to get hold of the fish? You use a net. And so the net is the basic thing we have for getting hold of the wiggly world. A net is something regular. And I can number the holes in a net. So many holes up, so many holes across. And if I can number these holes, I can count exactly where each wiggle is in terms of a hole in that net. But in order to do that, I've got to break up the wiggle into bits. And I've got to call this a specific bit, and this the next bit of the wiggle, and this the next bit, and this the next bit of the wiggle. And so these bits are things which I mark out in order to talk about the wiggle, in order to measure it, and therefore in order to control it. But in nature, in fact, in the physical world, the wiggle isn't bitted. So the world doesn't come thing. You and I are all as much continuous with the physical universe as a wave is continuous with the ocean. The ocean waves, and the universe peoples. And as the wave, I wave at you and say, you! The world is waving at me with you. And saying, hi, I'm here. But the way we feel and sense our existence, being based on a myth that we are made, that we are parts, that we are things, our consciousness has been influenced so that each one of us does not feel that. We feel we have been hypnotized, literally hypnotized, by social convention into feeling and sensing that we exist only inside our skins. That we are not the original bang, but just something out on the end of it. And therefore we are scared stiff. My wave is going to disappear. And I'm going to die. And that would be awful.